Welcome, everybody, to the Green Team of the Legendarium podcast. We are an offshoot of the Legendarium podcast, and today we're going to be talking about Malice by John Gwynne, 4-book series. And with me today, I have Soulution.
Hey, everyone.
And Eradandis.
Hi there.
And I'm Yettibeats, and what a trio for this series. I mean, who couldn't have picked three better people to cover this epic adventure, epic fantasy. And before we get started, I just want to say, because I always forget beforehand, if you're listening and you like what you hear, or especially if you hate what you hear, I'd prefer, go to the Legendarium's Discord. And it's a great community. It's fun to chat up books with people and disagree and agree and add to your TBR list. So definitely go there. And yeah, we're there because I have no life. All right. Let's get into the book, boys.
Okay.
So let's do no spoilers right now. And I guess I'll just say, I'll start with Eradandis. Give me your initial thoughts on Malice, and we'll dive deeper. But just your initial thoughts on John Gwynne and Malice. Because you're the one who wanted to start this.
I'm the one who wanted to start this. So look, I'll start by saying, well, hey, I like the book. So I'll start with that. So then let me get the longer version. I always feel like books fall, like I categorize them. So there's books that are trying to do something new and they're well written. That's like my top tier. And then there's books that they're doing something that you know and is well written. And that's the next level down. And that's where I would put this series at, where he's doing very familiar fantasy tropes. He just does it well. I would say this is like a good comfort read. It's like picking up an old friend and going, oh, hey, how are you doing? And that's why I decided to recommend it. So
there you go.
Okay.
Soul, what about you? Did you like this book, or did you hate it with the passion of 1,000 suns?
It's closer to I liked it with a passion. I didn't love it that much, but I did like it a lot. I did not find it comforting. It feel like on a reread it could be comforting. I found this a fun, tense wait for certain moments to drop, but nothing like too crazy. Specifically on one of the side plots that we'll get into later in the spoilers. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a great read, and it just kept building. It was very similar to the Sander Lanch that gets dubbed and around that 3/4 of into the novel where it just keeps going and going and going, and you just can't stop. You want to finish the whole book. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you both kind of hit the nail on the head there. Like for him, I remember he said he's a big fan of Gemmell, this author, John Gwynne. And the thing he likes is that Gemmell could combine like plot and character with like a blistering pace. And when I saw that quote, I was like, yeah, he definitely was inspired by him.
Okay, you just blew me away. Seriously. I hate it when other people say blew you away, but you blew me away because I was going to make the comp of to kind of like add on to what Soul said about it being a comfort read, that it reminded me so much of David Gemmell and his Drenai series and his Jerusalem Man series. So that's phenomenal that you dropped that quote on me. So that's awesome.
Beat you to it. No, yeah. I mean, you've clearly found it, evident in his writing. I mean, I think that's what he prioritizes, and that's what this book prioritized. I think, the plot definitely. I mean, that was one thing that stood out to me, and we'll talk about it shortly. But these short chapters that just move, and I've seen some complaints where some people think it's actually slow in the beginning. And I think that's fair. I mean, he's introducing a ton of characters, but I wouldn't call that. I don't know if that's typically slow or that's just something you have to do if you're going to write an epic fantasy with generally 7 POVs in a book one. I don't know how that would be fast I don't know how you are not slow and then pull off that book.
Well, can I do a well actually? So
yeah, sure.
So look, this is where I think how the book is structured is just as important as how it's written. Because if you look at it, the book itself, I mean, it's a hefty book. It's what,
Like over
600 plus
600.
pages?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a big book, right? And with any book of that size, of course, the pacing's going to not be as fast as it is in a shorter book. And in this one, where it's going to be over 4 novels, he has to do some world building. And how he does his world building is that's where we can discuss that later, but that's kind of where I think maybe the slowness comes from. But then he makes these choices to accelerate the reading experience by doing these short chapters. So he punches you with like this one little tidbit, and then he goes off to another story. And he may not come back to that original POV for the equivalent. It feels like a long time because you're going 10 chapters or 8 chapters, which is, maybe only a quarter of the book, but it feels like it's longer because he's doing these short, punchy chapters. So I didn't get to experience the slowness because he paced. To me, the pacing of the book felt faster because of the shortness of the chapters.
Yeah, I agree. I think also it helps that even though he had multiple POVs, there were still really only 3 plots. Like those characters were all in those 3 plots. So you could read one chapter and be like, "Oh, I know. I'll just check my chapter list in my book real quick," which you can't do if you're in physical, but in digital is one of the reasons I love it. I don't mind spoiling, 20 pages for myself and be like, "Oh, the next chapter is someone who's also in this POV that you're currently reading about. It's one of the side characters."
Yeah, it's a good point. This isn't spoilers, but I think what you're saying, Sol, is essentially it's Corbin, it's Veridis, and it's Castell. I mean, there's other characters involved in that, but those are the 3 like different storylines we're all involved
those are the
in.
plot lines, and you'll get a couple other POVs that are still around that. You may not get something,
and frankly,
from them, but
it's 2. I mean, Castell's like a distant third, if we're being honest. But yeah, you're right. You're right in that. I think my biggest issue, and I actually, this is his first book ever, and he was just writing it to entertain his family as a hobby. And
great first book. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, first book ever. He'd never written any fiction before, only dissertations.
Wow.
The one criticism I had, and I think if I remember correctly, I think he gets better with this, but I think there's an aimlessness a little bit in the story in this one, where in the later books, I think he kind of focuses on where the story's going, and it's more of like a straight line towards there's an end or just something he's aiming for. Where this one, it was kind of a little aimless at points, and I didn't find that slow, but I did find it not as honed as maybe a second time or third time author could have. But I mean, it's a small quibble, but I don't know if you guys felt that way.
It's interesting you said aimless. So I hear what you're talking about when you say aimlessness. I chalk that up to the world building experience.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to introduce his world there. And interesting that this is his first book, because I mean, I'd say as his first novel, like there's if I have to be critical of something in the story, look, some of the paragraphs could be tighter and there was some awkward phrasing here and there, but it wasn't anything. None of it ever took me out of the story. It's just like, oh, that's not a choice I would have made, or that's not a choice that I think made the story flow. But those were they weren't so glaring that it took me out of the story.
I want to say that you say it's aimless, and then you say it's world building. I actually think I liked it with the character development. It felt a little aimless, quote, at times, because he felt like he was trying to age and show growth in the characters, and it felt like he was purposely doing certain activities that were taking longer in the storyline. And I felt like that was specifically for character development.
Yeah, I think that, just like you said, that just wasn't. He didn't care to make that stuff subtle. I think the character development was like clear, and like Era said, this is like a fantasy we've seen before. So like Corbin stuff, I mean, that development, that's stuff we've seen before, but he did it well. But he did it, and there is he puts his own little modern twist on it, which I think becomes clear at the end. But it's these characters that we know, like Corbin's not. We'll get into it, but as long as that character's not boring, it's all good. We'll see where he takes that, and he's got other POVs that really, I think, bolster his main character.
No, so I agree with all of that, and that's really what I meant by comfort read. Not that the story itself is like a feel good story, but that okay, I see where it's going, right? And when people talk about it being slow, I guess where the disconnect comes in for me of okay, so and like one of the characters, and we'll get into it when we get to the spoiler section, is like a version of Sterling and Salat. And then we have another one who's kind of like the Mordred. And we kind of have like, if you're looking at Arthurian legends, you can almost place each person kind of in a particular slot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
I mean, to me, it just depends on perspective. If you're looking at the traditional tropes, no matter what fantasy version you want to use, you can put these guys into slots and go, ooh, I wonder how they develop. So I never felt that slowness.
Right. Neither did I. I want to dip around to one of Red's questions. Sorry, not Red. Lady Sweden's questions. And kind of what you'd say the type of reader this book is for. There's an author that's going to come up. I think one of you will bring up, maybe not. So I'm just going to say some of the things that John Gwynne brought up. He said Bernard Cromwell, he really took inspiration from him, but he wanted it to be like that, but a little more fantasy driven. He said Tolkien's epicness. Yeah, he goes for epicness. And he said Braveheart. He said, honestly, Braveheart was a big, the battle scenes of that movie was a big inspiration for him, and he kind of wanted to make it feel that his world was just like that. That, if you're carrying a shield for 15 minutes, a character feels that, and has, and he wants that to feel lived in. So I think books and movies like that and authors were inspirations. And if you like them and you like those types of movies, that might be something you would like. And as we said, Gemmell, who he's like one of his favorite authors. But I'll let you guys answer that question. There is one specific author and series I think it's very similar to too.
Well, you want to go first?
So am I just listing like authors I think is for, or no, specifically the reader?
Just the reader. However you want to answer that question. You can.
I think somebody who's okay with tropes. Somebody who's not in the mood to see tropes reverted or reversed or whatever you want to call it. Just this is a book that does a trope well, and it's written fairly well, and it's a fun read, and like you said, it's got good characters. I feel like that's what the kind of reader it would be for. It's for me. It's for me. So could be for you. I don't know.
We knew it would be for you, Soul.
Yeah, you guys did. You did a good job on that one.
Yeah, this one has you written all over it, Soul. So I'd go. Let me see. Less caustic Joe Abercrombie. Yeah, no, because Joe Abercrombie can be very acerbic. So less caustic Joe Abercrombie. Go ahead.
I mean,
you're about to say something, Yeti?
Yeah, I just don't think. I think thematically, Abercrombie's just way more nihilistic and pessimistic and cynical.
That's where I was going with the
okay, yeah.
The services. Absolutely, I agree. Absolutely, David Gemmell, obviously. Those are the big ones. Look, I mean, I would say for people who like traditional fantasy, this is right up your alley. If you want maybe a grittier young adult stuff, that kind of maybe would fit the type of person who might want it. And the only reason I say young adult is because the characters start off pretty young. Like they're 14, 15 years of age. Yeah. And you see them grow. So, maybe that, but grittier, obviously, because there's some more mature stuff that happens in the story. I would say who it's not for people who definitely want representation in their books. Don't read it. Go read something else. Go read Max Gladstone, who's an excellent author. I love Max Gladstone. Go read Simon Jimenez, again, excellent author. Just, this book isn't for you. It's not intended for you. Move on.
That's right. That's a good point. I mean, it's very white and it's very, I don't know, standard. I don't think there's any
it's
gay
not
or
breaking the
lesbian.
mold where it's trying to refine the mold that it's in and do a good job of it.
Yeah. So, Yeah, I think you guys are spot on. Epic fantasy, if you like epic fantasy. I don't think this is grimdark. I think this is strictly epic fantasy. I think
Yeah.
it wars between, like, thematically, there's a war going on between light and darkness, and I think the author's trying to say one version will outduel the other. I do think he likes to put a little more gray in the epic fantasy in the 80s or 70s. I think this book is a lot of is very much about choices characters make and which way that can go. And one choice can dip them over to one side or another. We'll get into it, but I think loyalty is actually is really a big subject in this, more than I think it's more complex than actually in many other series. But the author I was thinking about, and only because of the way it's structured by character, the titles of the chapters are by character, is George R. R. Martin. This is what I've been kind of warring with as I was reading it, the differences between them. I think George R. R. Martin's a much better writer than John Gwynne. No offense to John Gwynne. But I think the way he structures it by character and some of the things the characters, I don't want to go into too many spoilers because I've read the whole series, but where the characters end up in the first book in some characters and how they are in the last book are completely different. And I think he definitely had inspiration for some of that because that's not an 80s or an 80s fantasy thing. Characters weren't. It wasn't until kind of like him that kind of happened. Well, maybe not until him, but
Well, I see what you're saying, but I guess where I would kind of go where the similar, at least to the point where we're at, which is book one. Like, for example, like to me, I'm not disagreeing with anything you say with what you said up to this point. I guess where I will push back a little bit is, like, for example, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but like, it's clear to me, it's so clear that John Gwynne gets what it means to be a dad. He gets what it means, like that whole like family bond and like what it means and how it affects you and how it affects the kid and like all that stuff. I mean, if that's a strength, like to me, that's one of the core strengths of the book. And if there's something that George R. R. Martin could have cared less about than family, I really don't know. Like, I mean, he. If anything, I got that impression from them. I won't even get into it.
No, that's fine. No, I'll just say I agree. That's one of my favorite parts of the relationships with these characters is the family bonds.
Yeah,
adopted family or not,
right,
is great.
Yeah, you guys are probably right. There's more that they have not in common than in common. But I did just that structure of how he kind of writes the book, and really, it's a less, I don't know, lack of a better term, hardcore, because George R. R. Martin, A Song of Ice and Fire that's dipping into whatever you want to call grimdark is,
the
and stuff
grimdark.
like that. Well, this is more like a light. If you like that structure, but maybe a little lighter and more epic, and you like to see good guys.
What about Robert Jordan? Say Robert Jordan instead of George R. R. Martin, and I'll agree with you.
I'm not the right person to talk about Wheel of Time. I'm just going to start bashing it on this, and
fine. Well, we're just talking about character structure, like because it does, it follows a character per chapter, pretty much.
I would take these characters any day over anything. Wheel of Time.
Well, the chapters may be 100 pages long, but they're still a chapter from a point of view. So
I prefer Gwynne's chapter length by
I agree.
a long
shot. If we're talking chapter length, and I don't know. Yeah, that's anyway. What else do we want to get into? Anything else we want to talk about? Oh, the strengths of John Gwynne, any of his writing technique.
So I don't know whether this goes into the spoiler section or not, but I do want to talk about kind of some of the real world like references he's using. I don't know whether we should bring it up here or whether we should wait. Like, for example, the religious stuff that they use in the book. I spoke to you guys about it. I don't know whether that would fall under the spoiler section or not.
I think that's spoiler section because we're going to have to talk about.
I have one thing then before we hop into the spoilers for this subject. I really enjoy the way he writes descriptions of events and interactions with the characters where there's awkward comedy, but it's not told through dialogue. It's told through just what the characters are doing and how they're expressing their emotions and then moving on. into
Right.
whatever's going on. So I do enjoy that part of how he wrote the characters.
He's not like lingering on it as like a comedic moment. He's just like, this
No, and
is a
he's not.
relatable, funny thing, relatable
Yeah,
thing that we all go through and kind of
it
goes on.
feels subtle. It feels like if you're not even paying attention, you could miss it, or it's just like, oh, this character did a quirky thing. You're like, no, they just did this because they thought this was happening, and it was just interesting to read that way, and I liked it.
No, that yeah. Well, that's a good point. I guess. Well, I would piggyback on that by going another strength to go along with that is he's subtle about it, but like the quote bad guys aren't all bad. They have good qualities, and the good guys have some. They're flawed, right? Like some are whatever. We can get into it later, but he'll do it to your point subtly. Like it'll be like in a sentence here or a sentence there, or an awkward glance or something like that, and he won't dwell on it. He'll just make it and move on.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it, Era. This series, all right, if I could say anything about this series to someone without spoilers, I would say think of the concept of we're all heroes of our own story. Think of that, and that's in this fantasy book. That's what this fantasy book is. Era just said that. Not there's maybe someone who's kind of comically evil, but even he has familial family that stuff going on that made him made a choice, and he thinks he's doing the right thing for him and his, someone calls him out on it. But like a lot of these characters all think they're the hero of their own story in some way, or definitely one character does. But I think that's like a good tagline for this series and how people, all think they're doing the right thing, and that makes characters that possibly are evil more interesting, obviously.
Yep. The faithful and the fallen.
Yep. Within like the first 50 pages, I think they said faithful and fallen. All right. So for listeners, what we're going to do for this episode, we're not joking. There's a lot of POVs. We're going to go character by character of the POV characters, and we're just going to branch off from there. I guess I don't really want to do a recap because there's just so much that happens. I'll try to give a general background of what's going on, and you guys, when I'm done, chime in and fill in just anything small you think I missed. But essentially, there's this they live in the banished lands, they call it. There's a bunch of kingdoms, and we're essentially have two stories. One is there's political things going on with all the different kingdoms, and there's kings and one high king. But the real second one is that there's a god war coming, and they have their version of the good guy. I don't know what would be a god, the good god, and then the devil is on the other side. Can't remember their names. Elion and something within it, Azeroth, right? Azeroth is evil, Elion's the good one, and eventually they're going to start this god war, but each side has their champion. There's a bright star for Elion, the good side, a black sun for Azeroth, the dark side, and the characters in this, essentially they're looking for the bright star, the good guy, and who needs to fight the black sun, the bad champion. And that's kind of the gist of it. I don't think I missed anything else other than that. It's just you're meeting all these characters for the first time and their politics and where they are in their kingdoms and their standings, and such like that. And the plot unfolds about, this bigger picture of what's going on. Is that a shoddy enough kind of generalization?
The banished lands have a Celtic flavor, Celtic origin. I guess is important to note.
Yeah, I like that it wasn't all just Norse or something like that. There was a lot of little stuff like that.
Very Celtic. I'm glad you pointed that out. He said that all throughout every interview I read. He wanted to base it on Celtic things. You could even the names of the places, Duncarrig, things like that were very Celtic inspired. So you get that sense when reading it with the names, the way they talk. They're called bairns. Isn't like little kids called bairns and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
So the way he uses that vocabulary is definitely distinct. So as the podcast host, I chose the first person to start with, even though I don't know if this is the right person to start with. But I would like to start with Eradandis. And I think he's the most interesting character in this book. And so just to tell people, Eradandis is the youngest son to one of the kings, and essentially his older brother is kind of the hotshot, and he's just sent off to be the High King's the prince of the High King, his first sword. Essentially, he joins up and he's part of his group, and he becomes his first sword. And that prince is Nether, who we don't have a POV for, but he is essentially someone who becomes to believe he is the bright star, the hero, and Veridus is his first sword, and we see everything going on through his eyes. So John Gwynne chose to not go through who he says the bright star is, his eyes. He chose to go through Veridus's eyes, and I think that's a very important distinction. And there's certain elements, certain things that happen between these characters, either saving lives, Veridus jumps in to defend Nether from a giant he meets for the first time, Alcyon, that create loyalty and a bond between them that over the course of the book becomes unbreakable. And that's interesting because Nether, as we know, does some suspect things, shall we say, and Veridus's loyalty sticks with him throughout that. And I think that, I don't know, I thought that made him incredibly interesting, especially to see his conscience shift back and forth. What'd you guys think of, how about you, Saul? What'd you think of Veridus?
Wait. We need to add that Veridus is also like the best swordsman in the Banished Lands.
That's true. Yep. He's
Lancelot. Go ahead, Soul.
Okay. Well, I mean, apparently in every POV storyline, there's always like one best swordsman that gets bested by the new best swordsman. So you never actually know if anyone's actually a good swordsman until they get bested by the next best swordsman.
I want to say the swordsman like levels on it's like a Dragon Ball Z thing. It's like, oh, this guy.
It is.
Then you're like, oh, wait a second.
It reminds me of my progression fantasy and my lit RPGs that that I read once in a while. I'm like, you know what? This is exactly what it feels like. It brings me right back home. I love it.
But you're right. Veridus is supposed to be known as like one of the top.
He's really good.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether he's that god tier, but he is definitely very good. Honestly, he's probably my least favorite POV for the book. I don't know if that's a hot take. Probably will be because I'm sure you guys like the more developed characters. I didn't really vibe with him as much. I got where he was trying to go. He's having family issues. He's bonding to a psychopath. He's doing all this stuff. He's trying to find his identity. But I just wanted more Castell and Corbin, man. I don't know what to say. He was still a good character. I just didn't really vibe with him as much as I thought I was going to.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with Soul.
Disagree
with Soul.
Yeah, so. right back to the cradle thing. Go ahead. What do you got?
There you go.
Okay.
Got to disagree. So, look, Veridus is interesting because you have the traditional good guy, like the trusty right-hand man, right? The dependable person who's always there and will be there to save the day. That's Veridus. Except he's going to be on the bad guy side. He's going to be with Nether. And Nether, mind you, he thinks he's the bright star. He thinks he's the good guy. But if we're looking at it from the Celtic ethos, who is the mortal enemy of the Celtics? Of the Celts? It ends up being the Romans. Okay, because the Romans basically commit genocide on the Celts. Go read the history of Julius Caesar if anybody wants any background about it. So Nether is the representation of Rome because he's the one that introduces the shield wall and Roman tactics, all by looking at a colony of ants, which that I had a problem with. But Nether is the representation of Rome, and Nether is the one who is the representation of the ends justify the means. Right? That's basically, it's for the greater good, it's for the greater good, it's for the greater good. And Veridus, he's the good guy. Like he comes from a place of honor and he wants to do what's right, what's best. But what he's doing is being perverted by the person he's decided to bond himself to. So that's why I found him interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think he's been perverted by loyalty. That's why I thought I brought that word up before. I thought he's so interesting because, the first fantasy I saw or one that made an impact on me with many others was the Lord of the Rings movies. And what do they say about Samwise? He's the most loyal friend. That's the best thing about him. He's so loyal. Okay, I mean, that's amazing. But in this story, what the loyal Veritas is as loyal as Sam, I'd argue. But it's leading to awful, awful things, like truly awful things. And I really liked how Gwynne kind of takes that idea of loyalty. I mean, again, I don't want to get too real world, but I'll just say with sports, you can get too loyal, I think. If they like say your owner is a dirtbag, or doing terrible things, but you're loyal to your team, or they sign a football quarterback who's, charged with bad things, but you're loyal to your team. Look at
or
politics.
you're a Philadelphia 76ers fan. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
Or any Philadelphia.
there's lines you don't
Anybody.
cross, right, Yeti?
Take it easy. But even politics, I mean, I don't want to go down too deep into that, but the loyalty on like, this is my team and that I'm sticking with it no matter what. I mean, it gets you in bad places. And I love that he addressed that with Veritas in a character, maybe in any other book, he'd be a hero. He'd be the hero of the story. But in this one, he's directly, I mean, a lot of the things Nether gets away with, I don't think he would without Veritas, obviously physically because of his swordsmanship. But a lot of characters look at Veritas and they talk to him beforehand. They're like, well, Nether can't be that bad. He has Veritas, and Veritas is a good guy. We talked to him. He's an honest guy. And so it's just, I really like that dynamic. And that was one of the things that's why he's one of my favorite characters going into the later books, going into this book.
Let me add on that, because I think with an additional complication or additional layer to that, which is interesting, is Veritas' relationship with his father. So, because there's a couple layers to that, because obviously his relationship with his father is, shall we say, complicated, and he has some very obvious and real personal animosity towards his father, but it's also making him discount his father's political calculations that are, I assume, going to come to the fore in future books against Nether, and it's going to color how Veritas will ultimately respond to his father and his brother in future books, and I find that also very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not spoiling anything for you guys, but again, with the George R. R. Martin thing, there's so many characters we meet in this book and ones we haven't met that are playing a bigger part in the series, which I always find cool. That characters that we just met for one chapter because they visit a land, and then that's it for this book. Later books, and I definitely Veritas' whole family will come into play into the later books, and it's exciting. I mean, he's using his whole world, like you said. I think he's a really good world builder for this being his first book, to kind of set stuff like up, set stuff up like this, but it doesn't feel needless, I guess to say. He didn't lay it on too thick, but
No, I feel like there's always been a plan that he had. He wasn't just throwing this in and then, nope, that was it. It does feel like he has a plan. I'm really excited. Honestly, the best part about Veritas for me, because I don't like him too much, is that I can't wait to see this guy have that realization that he's with a crazy person. This is going to be the best when he's like, oh no, I'm on the bad side. Am I the bad guy now? Just like that. Like, I can't wait to see it.
So I have two questions for you. So one,
Okay.
do you want to see him realize that he's with the quote bad guy, or do you want to see him die fighting for the bad guy? What's your preference? Because there's a difference there.
No, I want to see him realize it. And because I feel like I feel like that's what it's leading up to, is more of a realization. And then it's going to decide, what is this character going to do when he was so loyal to a terrible person because he was just trying to stay loyal and do all that. I want to see if he turns good, or if he tries to convince his friend and fails. I want to see what happens.
Yeah. The second thing I want to ask, and you keep on mentioning that there is a psychopath or as a crazy person.
Yeah.
Discuss, because I would like to push back on that a little bit.
We are all the hero of our story, and he is like the prime example.
His arrogance, his just his confidence that he is the chosen one to kill his own father, to that everything means what he can do, and just that it's the best thing for the world, and that he's constantly believing everything he's doing is right.
So definitely true. we also should say his father is the High King in name only. The kingdoms have their kings, but
Yeah.
the High King
Yeah.
can hold a council, and his father is the one who told all the other kings about this, the evil versus the good. The bright star versus the black sun. And ever since then, to be fair to Nether, he's had dreams where he's been, I can't think of the word, but kind of fooled into thinking he's something he's not. He has an advisor come to him who is kind of very wizardly and gives good advice, pretty much telling him he is the bright star. When you have so many things saying this, and you yourself, again, you think you're the hero. Yeah, at the beginning of this,
Feed that ego. Yeah.
Right. And it's just he thinks he's doing it for good. He's like, this world needs saving, and I'm clearly the one they chose, and I have to man up and lead and do it. And like that's what I kind of liked about this, is that he didn't quickly turn evil in the start of it. There was no hints in the beginning. There was little things maybe, but he didn't do anything evil until it was progressively one more and more and more till the back half of the book, we're like, oh, this dude's just, like Era said, he just wants victory. He's just, as long as it puts him on top, he's like, this is the way. If they're not going to agree to join my my thing, I'm going to remove them and put someone in who will. I mean, that at that point, like you said, you're in full evil territory. But it started with him, and still thinks he's the good person. He's.
I want to be clear. I apologize if I didn't explain it clearly enough. I do not dislike reading this character. I really enjoy reading this character, and I like to see where it's going. I was just having problems with his personality, is what I just wanted to complain about that just a little bit.
So his weakness is his pride.
Yeah,
I think we all agree with that, right?
Yeah.
But you have to look at him as the stand-in for Rome. In actual history, if you look at the Romans, I mean, and you weren't Roman, prideful, arrogant, they were going to get their way no matter what. You can crush them 10 times, they're going to come back 11. They will cheat, lie, whatever to get their way, and they will take you over, kill everybody in their path, and you're just going to have to live under their boot heel. That's how it was for people who weren't Romans facing Rome. That's Nether. And so if I have a quibble with Nether, I find it very difficult to believe that in 2 years he can recreate what took centuries to do in real life with the whole Roman legions and all that. That's my personal quibble. So I guess we have to presume that Nether is a political and military genius of some sort, which I don't buy, but that's my quibble.
No. I mean, I'm kind of with you there. Like you said, it was the ant thing kind of threw me. I was like, that's it. Like something that revolutionary has never even occurred to anybody in all these people anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, it wasn't it was something I could overlook. It still didn't really take me out of the story. It was fine.
It feels like a lot of bad things go his way, or like good, like for him, good things. But like the bad guys, a lot of things go their way. Where it's like either the timeliness or however. And I think a lot of that has to do. He's kind of got like an ultimate helper on his side, which is I didn't mind Calidus, but at the same time, he's kind of like, well, he knows everything. He can do everything.
So I love that you mentioned that things seem to break the bad guy's way, which was an interesting twist because usually the good things just happen for the good guys at just the right time, and it seems like nope, it happens the exact opposite way every time. Like everything seems to break in his favor, which was an interesting choice that I enjoyed. Right.
Yeah, again, I think he has this mix of being like the standard fantasy that we know, but he puts these little twists on it to make it either, I don't know if I'd say modern, but his own, and maybe things that he thought would spice it up or differ it from the stuff he grew up with.
Can we talk about the prophecy for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about the prophecy, and then we'll segue right into Corbin because I feel like he needs to be talked about.
So, I want to talk about I guess I want to use the prophecy as a segue to talk about the religion, and I don't know. So this is where I kind of have some issues here. So look, it's a vaguely Judeo-Christian religion, whatever. That doesn't bother me at all. So basically, the bad guys are called Kedoshim, or the fallen angels are called Kedoshim, and the good guy angels are Ben Elim. So as you may or may not know, I'm Jewish. So Ben Elim, the actual translation of Ben Elim means sons of God. That's the actual translation from Hebrew to English. So, and traditionally it was used for people that were touched by prophets or considered holy of some sort. So I'm like, all right, I get it. So Ben Elim, faithful, I got it. So Kadosh or Kadoshim, it's a traditional prayer that's used, which Kadosh literally translates to holy. So, you literally say, there's a prayer we say every Saturday. That's Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. I don't know, it's about whatever. So, but it means holy, 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 praise be our Lord. And he's calling basically the bad guy angels Kadoshim, or the holy ones. So, which I found interesting, because at first I'm like, dude, that's so wrong. But then I kind of thought about it in the context of what Yeti's saying, is that everybody's the hero of their own story. So you have the Kadoshim, the people who are calling themselves holy. Then you have the Ben Elim, the people who call themselves the sons of God. And I'm like, that's a very interesting choice. So.
Yeah, I can't spoil too much, but yeah, just you're onto something.
I can only go based on the words. I can only go based on the words.
Yeah, based on the words, that's good to know, because it does feel like it fits what is happening in the plot lines with, how we're seeing the Black Sun become the Black Sun while he thinks he's the whatever the good guy is. Bright Star. So I think it's really fun to see, like, this is technically the Kadoshan side, but they all think it's the Ben Elim side. It's really cool to see that, and I'm glad that you gave me some of the origins of the words there. It's nice.
And I will say one more thing. I do find an interesting choice. I'm just going to say it's an interesting choice that
means bad.
That the good guy side, that basically God is absent, and that basically if you're going to win, you got to figure it out on your own against the bad guy with an active God on their side.
Yep.
So I found that an interesting choice.
Not only absent, if I'm not mistaken, they were abandoned. At least that's what the people say, that they were abandoned by, which is also kind of probably related to some. I don't know religion as well as you do, but your God being abandoned, and then one day he'll come back. Maybe it's kind of, I think that plays into something. Yeah, you guys are on the right track. I think I liked what he did with the Ben Elim and the other side too. As we go along, you'll see it's intriguing. It's not what I expected, I guess.
Can I say this? So traditionally, and we're talking traditionally, like ancient medieval times, that type of stuff. In Judaism, the angels were not exactly. They aren't like what we think of nowadays. They aren't like warm and cozy or super fuzzy. They were kind of like, basically like givers of justice, bringers of divine punishment. They weren't exactly like, super cuddly people. So I'll be interesting to see how Gwynne takes the story in that regard.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Corbin. He is our, at the end of the book, it kind of leads on to believe he's the bright star. He's essentially a young kid in one of the towns, the kingdoms. He has he's the son of a blacksmith, I believe. And he has a mysterious stable master who has a limp, but always is watching him. And he
is actually the best swordsman. Sorry, spoilers. He's the actual best swordsman.
Gar, yes, we find at the end of the book that he kind of unleashes, and it's a sight to behold. But he's the one who has a sister, Kerwin, I think her name's pronounced. And he's the prototypical person you've read in any like Chosen One storyline. He starts off scared, doesn't stick up for himself in front of bullies, doesn't really know how to fight, and eventually he progresses to being trained with a sword. He's incredible. He's like a protege with a sword, spear and bow, not so much. But he's the one who's making these kind of adolescent growing up choices of what is right and what is wrong and what to do, in those situations. And since he's your favorite character, Soul, maybe you should preach on him a little bit, why, what you took from him and what what kind of, because I mean, I'd say there's a bunch of POVs, but it's almost like 40 or 50% Corbin. I mean, he gets
Yeah.
the bulk of the story.
And if it's not Corbin, it's his sister, or it's Camlin, or it's somebody that's related to his current plot going on, and it's semi revolving around Corbin. Um, I mean, I just like how well the character's written. He's not excessively whiny or annoying. He has multiple mentors. He has the apprentice. He's an apprentice to the witch or whatever, the healer.
Yep.
He's
Right.
got the stable master, which is, the mentor in many stories. He's got the father, who's the forge, which is like barely a mentor and more of a father, which is nice to see that he
Mhm.
really doesn't even show much where he's inside the forge. And if he does, you get little moments of his father being an actual father and relating to his son or reaching out to him in certain ways that's really touching but not too cloying. And his family is just, it's a great character for him to be interacting with the rest of the side characters. It wasn't like I was reading Game of Thrones or something where you
Mm.
get a cool character and then they're just having a lot of conflict with a lot of characters. There's very few close friendships with a lot of characters. It's always like, all right, we have one friend and then everybody else hates us and we got to figure our way out of the situation. And that's just every POV and like something like George Martin. But here, this is Corbin, like you said, he's probably the biggest POV character of the book, and he just has mostly wholesome relationships. And this is where I think you guys get the that comfy feeling is that this is a tried and true trope. He does it well, and it's very comforting to read these little Corby chapters. I really enjoy it.
The thing I like about Corbin the most is that you kind of touched on it, Soul, is that he's surrounded by interesting people, or that people that lift him up, like you say. I think, and there's different instances, like you said Thanon, who's his dad, who doesn't play a super big role, but he plays a vital role to Corbin. And I thought it was a very, like Era said, this guy knows parenting. Like there's a very memorable scene where Corbin's been being bullied, and Thanon goes and said, "Hey, you got to deal with things with words." And he goes to this child's parent, intending to deal with it with words, and he ends up beating the crap out of him with his hands because he's like a big guy, and it doesn't, his temper gets the best of him. But I like to show that Corbin could see not only that his parents took up for him, obviously, but his parents are not perfect. I think that's a huge thing to say. Hey, my dad is not perfect, and that's like a true and tried parenting thing that I think we all grow up realizing at some point. And so I thought things like that was really nice. His relationship with his sister, I thought was good. How she would stick up for him in these bullying moments, and how it was embarrassing to him and emasculating. I think these small things that bolstered his character, who might not be the most exciting character going through a Veritas is, but he has these moments with all these different characters that I thought really helped him out as a POV. So,
and he's stubborn, and he's willful, and and he's respectful of his mentors and things like that, but he's not perfect by any means.
He talked back to the king.
Yeah, I mean, like
it's like, that was the quote that you're really poking the bear there. But
one of the things I do like about it, I'm not a fan of animal companions, but I like the Wolven that he teams up with, Storm.
Yeah,
because that wolf doesn't take crap from anybody, and I just love it that it's basically a borderline feral, and the only thing in the world that wolf tolerates is Corbin, and everybody else is just barely restrained like fury, and I love that. Like it was different, right? I agree with everything you guys said. Really, and it was interesting as I was reading the story. I was sitting there thinking, if I was younger, I would so identify with Corbin.
Yep.
But as I was reading the story, I identified with Thanon and Gar, kind of teaching Corbin how to be a man and what it means to kind of be responsible and be loyal and be truthful and all that stuff. And I'm like literally thinking of, like, as I was reading it, I'm like, damn, that's a good line. I'm going to use this on my son, right?
do it.
You gotta use your words. I'm like, that's a good, kind of like the way he phrased it. I'm like, well, I gotta try that sometime. Not the beating up people part, but
Right.
follow through on the. But anyway, so I agree with all that, and there's a lot of good. All the foundation was being built. I also like the fact that not only did he have his friend, did he have his family, his actual blood family, but he also had his found family too. At the same time, he had. I like that he had one friend who was there from the very beginning, and then the other friend, Yadath, and then the other friend, I forget his name, began with an F, who he created, Farrell, who he created over the course of the book. And by the end of the book, this is the friend who took up his dad's hammer, right? So, so it's interesting to see the way the threads all kind of interconnected, and then how Corbin, at the end of the book, he's like, Nether is going to go down no matter what at the end, and that's what made me ask you that question at the beginning of, what would you rather see, Corbin put a sword through Veritas, or Veritas kind of going, maybe I'm wrong, and then kind of join up with Corbin? Me personally, I want to see Veritas go down. I do not want him to have a redemption arc at all.
There.
No, Veritas.
Oh, I thought you were just
Veritas.
Okay. All right. I mean, I want to see. No, I want to see, because Corbin, like you said, would put a sword through him. But I feel like I want to see Veritas realize that there's terrible, and then maybe have to fight Corbin and be like, I'm fighting for the wrong side, and then we'll see what happens there. So
Look,
I want to see that.
I understand that, and this is where I'm going to push back. I presume, loyalty. Obviously, if you're loyal to somebody, we see this in love all the time, right? You'll cover over someone's warts, so you'll kind of make excuses for them, whatever. But you have to presume a certain amount of willful ignorance or willful stupidity on Veritas' part to have him, if we assume that Nether continues in this arc, for him not to realize that Nether is making some pretty rotten choices. At which point, you as Veritas have to make the decision of, I'm going to support him because he's my friend, which is what all the Nazis said, or you kind of go, what they're doing is wrong, and you go against them, right? So at some point, you reach the point of no return, and that's where I'm curious to see. Will Veritas reach the point of no return, and if so, will there be a redemption arc, or will he get his comeuppance the same way as Nether?
I think he's at that point now as this book is ending.
Well, he's known as the Kingslayer.
Exactly.
That was a big moment. That was a huge moment in his.
Well, not just that, but also he literally tried to save his friends, Castell and McKean. And he told them, basically, he's like, hey, you guys probably were going to betray you, and then you might die, so you might want to run. And they didn't run, and they died. And now I think we'll see what happens in the beginning of the next book, but I think either he's going to hit the point now, or he's going to hit it at the end of one of these books where it's just way, 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 way too late.
Veritas said that Roma would betray them, their uncle. He didn't say Jael would betray them.
Oh, I thought. Oh, I must have misread that. I thought he was like, "Hey, by the way, big betrayals are going on." So I thought he was trying.
But he said Roma. He's like, and they're like,
okay,
my uncle, he's kin. So that's, I think, not that it,
But I mean, he knew his were with him, and he was like, "You guys don't go around him because we're gonna, bad things are gonna happen." Either way, yeah. Sorry, we're getting off topic of Corbin, but
what I liked with Corbin and seeing, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I like comparing him at a certain point in the fair, obviously because they're on opposite ends, and I think it's interesting to see everyone in Corbin's life how they start to gravitate towards him. There's just something about him that they latch onto. Farrell's a good point of this, that his loyalty is kind of earned, and they see something in him what is because he's doing something just, and that's why they want. Even Tull saw it with the way he used or Pendathrin to use his the dog the wolfen to save Adana and the queen and everything. They say, hey, there's something good about this boy. Right before Tull dies, they ask him and he said there's something about him. He's courage, and whereas Nether, by force, he if they don't want to join him, he accesses them, and he forces them to bid by his will. And there's just a different spectrum where it should be a good clue, be like, oh, this is not the Bright Star.
So the traditional view of the Celts, and I guess I should have said this before, personally noble, truthful, courageous. Corbin is a stand-in for Celtic culture. Nether is a stand-in for Roman culture, right? So how do you show that you're somebody worth being a leader? You're personally courageous. You're personally truthful. You stand up for truth, honor, justice, etc. Right? That's what Corbin is, and people therefore become attracted to him.
Definitely. I want to bring up. I don't know where else to bring these two up, but I will say I like the relationship with Halion, who kind of Gar secretly trains Corbin in his mystic ways of fighting, but all the young students always get picked by a warrior and they train under them. And Halion is the one who chose him, and Halion and Connell, his younger brother, are two kind of outcasts who were granted immunity by Corbin's king, King Brennan. And I really like that. It was just another kind of fatherly protege dynamic, that another person seeing something in Corbin.
Fatherly or brotherly?
Not fatherly. Yeah. You're right. Big brotherly, I guess, like a big brother. But more like, I'd say teacher, actually, because I think
it's just another form of mentor, which is
mentorship.
Corbin has he collects them like Pokemon cards. But yeah.
My bet is that Connell's going to kill his brother at some point.
It's a shame they're not POV characters, because that dynamic is that's good stuff. Those two,
it's fire. I love it.
I know it's pretty good.
Wish there was more. Anytime those two are on the on screen, on page, I was like, give me more. I was like, I need more of it. I was like, Connell. Right when you meet Connell, you're like, that guy's a hothead. Like that guy. But I did want to bring them up because I think they're interesting characters, and it's interesting that Halion kind of was vaulted to such a high level. And he's now kind of the prince, the queen's bodyguard, but first sword.
And something you said, I think it's worth touching on here, because I think it's worthwhile pointing out. Because when Corbin starts studying with Halion, yes, he's a protege, but he's not better than Halion. He's not better than Gar. He's constantly learning throughout the book, and so kind of where Soul. This is like Soul's like wheelhouse, and this is where I knew he would love it. It's like, ooh, look, he's progressing. Oh, he's getting better. Oh, yeah, that's 100% in Soul's wheelhouse. But what I liked about it is that he wasn't like insta awesome. Like, he's having to work at it and become better at it. And there's some stuff he's just not good at. Like, don't give him a bow and arrow. Don't give him a spear,
bow and arrow, terrible. Spear, he's all right. Shield, okay. But the sword, yeah. And that's what it is. It's like the show of time throughout this novel, where some people felt a little aimless, which I can understand. I felt that was leading for all this progression for them to show this Corbin, this young man growing into being a man, because it's taking time. Constantly, it's like, oh, moons have passed. I'm like, there we go. There's our couple months have passed, got some more time, and they keep going. That way you get that sense of time.
So I have a question, and I know Yeti can't answer because he's read it.
Okay.
One of the questions I'm really interested in, like, we kind of see how Corbin is right now. He's not a man yet, but he's on the cusp of being one. And then we have Quinn. Right. We have his sister, Quinn. And we kind of know who she is, but she's not quite a woman yet either. What I'm interested in seeing is, what kind of man and woman do they become over the course of the next 4 books?
Well, it's going to be real tough for Quinn, because, well, now she's either in enemy territory or what's going on with her. She could be very, very changed and within the course of 1 book, I feel like. That's too hard to guess. But for Corbin, I mean...
Well, what's going to make it interesting to me, and this may be a totally spurious connection or whatever, is Quinn going to be the antithesis of Eradandis, right? Loyal to Corbin, but maybe she's not quite as upstanding and courageous, whatever, because she's going to have to go through some stuff to get back to Corbin. And, will that change her in some significant ways personally? I'm just curious. That's kind of
I'm with you, and I think that is what's going to happen. because Corbin himself, like, this is a big breaking point for their father being killed in this final part of the book, and then essentially Quinn's left behind. She's basically gonna be a prisoner, or if she can't, she's escaping. She's got to find some way back. She, like you said, he's gonna go through a lot of stuff, but yet Corbin's got to deal with the pressure of. I think he's gonna try and take on this entire crew. They're gonna go to Drasil. He's gonna try and like deal with his father dying. Like this is a big pivotal moment for pretty much everybody because they lost a lot of people. All of them
Well,
did.
I mean, Corbin's going to have to be a leader without ever having been a leader, right?
Yeah.
How do we know his sister's not dead? She took a big tumble.
Oh yeah, definitely did. Off screen.
No,
Off
no body,
screen
no
killings.
death.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Well, if we can
No,
segue to, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Castell. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
going to segue
exactly.
to deaths. So I guess the third biggest POV would be Castell, and he's another kind of warrior and a part of another kingdom, and his father's a king, and his father, I think, is deceased. Oh no, his uncle's the king. His father's deceased,
Yes.
and his big storyline is that he's staying with his uncle, but so is his older cousin, I believe. And his older cousin is probably the closest to a comically villain character we have.
Yeah.
They do not get along.
Probably.
It's like two siblings that hate each other, and it's toxic. It's like there's at a certain point there's no coming back from that, and he's kind of just trying to find his place in the world, essentially, where he doesn't have parents. He wants to be loyal to his uncle, but he just there's just too much infighting with his cousin, and he doesn't know what to do if it's not with this. And luckily, he has his shield brother Mackin, who was his father's shield brother, and essentially, I think, when I was reading this with Combat Wombat on the Discord, he's like, "Hey, who's your favorite character? What's the best POV?" And for me, the first read, I was like, "I'm all in on Castell." I was like, I like the POV. I'm interested in this thing. And he finished first, and he's like, "Yeah, enjoy."
Enjoy it. Yeah, let me know what you think at the end. And guess what? I'm sure you did.
So, and at the end, he's stabbed by his cousin, Jael, and that's the end of that.
Is it? Because it feels like this is the true beginning for McKinn. And I feel like this is like, okay, because this whole time, Castell has always had a real father figure by his side, no matter what happens, sacrificing himself multiple times when they're chased by giants or other things. Like, I got you, you go. And then he trained him well. He trained this kid well as his son, to where he's like, I'm not going to leave my father figure. He steps right up to him, and she's like, we'll die together.
So, yes, Soul, you are on the path, my friend. The reason I said Castell's POV was my favorite was because the most interesting character was McKinn to me. He was the one who apparently let Castell's father die. He couldn't save him, and now going into book 2, the same thing happens to Castell. I mean, that's a setup for a great character arc.
This is going to be brutal.
So that was something that I thought it was an interesting choice for Gwynne to use Castell's POV in this book. Essentially, what looks like to set up this character. What do you think, Anera?
This was my favorite storyline of the first book. I loved every choice Gwynne made with this plot line. All of it. I loved how he went to go be with the giant slayers, like towards like the middle third of it. I liked on the first third where Castell was kind of like, stubborn and kind of isolated from people, and then he has his moment of victory with against Jael, like in the when all the kings get together. His uncle trying to kind of repair the relationship. It's kind of like, I loved all of it. This was by far, I shouldn't say by far, but it was my favorite storyline. I was sitting going, well, obviously those two are going to have to fight. I don't want to say surprised that it happened so quickly. I was surprised by how abruptly he died.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I was too.
not that he was going to die, but just the abruptness of it. Which, again, I love the choices that were made in this. And if Mackin or McKinn is somebody who we get to follow, I'm going to love that. Like, I preemptively already am going to enjoy this because he's going to have a whole bunch of motivation. I would love to see some other POVs within this plot line as well.
And one of the things that would be great, I will not deny or confirm he will be a POV, but if he was to be one, I think a very smart choice and something that's refreshing. Eric kind of alluded to it. A lot of these characters are young. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, especially the POVs. So to get a character that's old and grizzled and frankly gone through a ton of loss and failure, I mean, that's opening up the story to just so many other avenues and things like that. So I just thought it was just so smart that he to kill a character and not be for shock value, I think isn't always the easiest thing to do. You know what I mean? I think there was a whole purpose he had in mind for Castell dying at the end of this book, like you said, so early. Yeah. And it never felt like, oh my God, he actually did that. It kind of did, but it wasn't like that wasn't the purpose. But, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. It was like, this makes sense. This relationship was never going to work out between those.
Well, what I will say is if Mackin ends up being a POV that we follow through books 2, 3, and 4, look, whatever that storyline is, so be it. But I want to tip my hat to Gwynne for making the choice of having the first book POV be basically the sidekick to Mackin for the first book, right?
Essentially a prologue for Mackin.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're following Robin in the first book, and then you get Batman for books 2, 3, and 4. So it's a great. If that's the case, that's a great, choice by the author.
Well, the last thing I'll say.
It sounds like he's nodding his head, so I'm guessing that's a yes. But
yeah. We're gonna ignore Yeti's camera right now. We're gonna pretend it's like the purple elephant right there. I really like the way that Castell lived his life in the book up to this point. It did not feel like Castell had to have some moment in the future. He did go to the Giants. He felt peace. He felt happy for a long time. And all this stuff, it felt like he had a conclusion to where when he died, I didn't feel like, no, this guy had so much going for him.
Right.
He did, but I don't know, like just the way Gwynne wrote the character arc for Castell felt like it was okay for this death as a conclusion. Was it sad? Yes. But I still felt satisfied that he did get his piece fighting the Giants with his father for quite a while.
He was an idiot. I mean, I don't know how to say. He was dumb. I mean, McKinn gave him so many options to say, hey, we need to get out of here. This is not going to end well with you and him. Someone's going to die. Obviously, for me, I thought he was going to die. McKinn.
Yeah, that's the science. That's what I thought too. I was like, please don't let him die.
Era was on it. He's like, oh no, one of these people are Castell. He's he's like, he messaged me. He's like, I think he's gonna die. I was like, oh yeah. But he gave him.
Wait, I forget who's the other one who was gonna die.
I think you said yeah, you said Corbin's sister.
Yeah.
Well, you said one of them are gonna die.
Well, I'll say that when we're done with Castell, but I'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah. So this guy, I mean, Castell was dumb. He had an anger issue. He made things work. He said he was going to try to talk to jail and try to smooth things over. McKinn's like, listen, I'm just telling you that's not going to end. That's not a good idea. And he did it anyway. And guess what? He lost his temper and made it unforgivable. We're a place where, wasn't coming back from. So when you say Soul that it felt, finished and, nothing left behind or nothing left unfinished, I guess you're right, because he had as many chances to change or just start a new life or do something else. But I think that goes to the point that he felt lost. I mean, he didn't know really what to do with his life, I really felt like. And I kind of went through where it's like, well, this is my family and I don't like them, but we got to patch it up because that's what you do with family. It's like, well, no, unfortunately for you, it didn't end that way. But again, I think it just leaves so many more interesting possibilities for someone an older person who just failed over and over, and the guilt. And it's, sorry, Castell, but you just opened great doors for great writing and other aspects.
Do you know what's going to be an interesting, I hope happens storyline? Because if the prophecy is not like it's kind of hits you over the head obvious, but like was it Black Heart and True Heart? I kind of want to see Nether being orbited by Veritas and Jael. I would love to see kind of how Jael is viewed by Veritas.
Right.
That's going to be interesting.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, as it happened at the end of this book, Gwyn's really good at obviously setting very things up, and then near a certain point, characters or paths cross together and they, head on. That happens, you'll see multiple times throughout the series, and he's really good at that, making it interesting and things you want to wait for, like all these things you're talking about, wanting to see what will happen. He makes sure he knows that the readers want to see these things. And anything else you want to say about Castell? Again, he was like the third biggest POV, but really he was kind of off on his side, and I think we're set on that. All right, do we want to quickly talk about Corbin's sister, or do we say enough about her? I didn't know if Saul wanted to say something about her.
I'm okay. I feel like we've touched, enough about her. We could do more, but I know we're running a little long. And
you don't want to talk about Gar?
I like Gar. Okay, and I like Thanon. Okay, this is the first time I read a book with the Chosen One trope, where he's got both parents alive all the way until the end of the book. And the whole time I'm like, who's going to die? Who's going to die? Please don't die. They're so friendly and wholesome. I don't want either of them to die. And I was dreading it. And then finally someone did. But I was very surprised that he just had two family members. He mentioned a dad like a tenth of the way into the novel. I was like, wait, this kid has a mom and a dad? And I had to like flip through the pages just to make sure I didn't misread it or something like that. I assumed like, oh, this kid would only have one parent, definitely. But yeah. Yeah, it was good.
How Thanon acted up to including him basically not even thinking twice about like, look, if I'm gonna have to die to save my family, to save my son, not even a hard choice, easiest choice in the world. I'm like, it's hard.
It's being a father.
Anyone who's a dad, like it's just like Gwyn obviously gets it. I mean, his son. He's a good dad. I mean, that's you can tell.
Read his book. He's a good dad.
He's a good dad.
He knows what it's about. Yeah.
He is. All right, so I want to bring up a character that is many fans' favorite, and frankly, in an interview, they asked John Gwynne who his favorite character is, and he said he loves them all, but there was one that stood out. So I'll read the quote real quick. One of my favorite characters is probably Camlin, a member of a band of outlaws. Life is simple for him: steal, follow orders, survive, but events conspire to reveal a hidden conscience buried deep, but still there. Tough choices and dangerous conspiracies force him to reevaluate his loyalties. So Camlin's a member of this brigand group, these kind of outlaws who hang in the forest, and he's captured in this point in this book after killing his band kills Dylan, a character that may or may not be named after one of our panelists. And he's captured and he's broken free, but Corbin and his sister kind of see him running away with another good guy, Merrick, as prisoner. And they kind of make a deal with the head of the brigands, Braith, and say, hey, if you don't tell anyone, we'll release him and let him live. And that was a big moment for Corbin. He said, okay, I'm trusting you. And they do. And eventually, Camlin sees Braith, his leader, who he's become loyal with over these years, and he sees him making all these bad decisions and taking orders from people more evil than him and making the choice, unlike someone, I should say, Veritas, and saying, you know what, loyalty isn't worth this. This is wrong. I know it's wrong. They're hurting women and children, and flip sides and joins essentially Corbin's side, the good guys team.
Yeah, and Team Corby.
And I think that was a really, fist in the air moment when he does that, and he's kind of just adopted into that crew and starts helping them out. And they say, hey, look like you're fighting for our king now. And he said, I'm not fighting for any king. This is just what felt right. I don't have any allegiance. And I think going forward, he's an interesting character who doesn't really have allegiances, just is totally drawn by his moral compass or what is simple to him. Or I think he used to do what was simple to him and what he knew, and he's branching out from that and making a little more difficult choices.
Yeah, he's growing as a character. And I did want, because he started befriending Marek, the hunter. this is already too late in the novel of all the plots kind of starting to converge and get into those final moments to where we didn't really need Camlin to have a POV, but I really wanted one of him back at the castle and learning to incorporate into society again and no longer being as a woodsman. And just, I wish I'd gotten that because I feel like I wanted just a little bit more Camlin to really connect with him. I
Right.
feel like I'm close. I don't feel like I connected with him yet, but I feel like I could. I just need a little bit more.
Ari, you don't seem sold on Camlin. You look like he's.
Well, I guess it's gonna be the equivalent of a hot take.
Oh.
Um, I always have a hard time with rogues whose like one weakness is I don't kill women and children. Well, you certainly don't have any trouble killing other people that aren't like women and children. He's obviously, let's be quite clear,
He's a murderer.
murdered people in the past. He's
Mm.
clearly a murderer. Let's not make any bones about it. That's what he is. That's how he made his life beforehand. And I have a really tough time of basically somebody who's essentially a villain, like having basically having a redemption arc, and only because he happens to work for the good guys that that he's somehow a good person. For me, he's irredeemably evil because he's a murderer. That's well established, and you're kind of looking up at this guy Yeti. He mentions how he's killed people in the past, but he draws the line at women and children. That was like in the first time we met him.
Right.
So,
yeah, I guess it.
Yeah. So I guess I would say, like, look, we've seen this trope before. Like, we see it with like modern works where, like, somebody has a past who he's a murderer. This person only did things under orders, and I tend to kind of be black and whitish about it. Is that like, I'm fine if he ends up being lovable and I'll follow his story arc and all that stuff. But to me, you can do good works and try to redeem yourself, but at the end of the day, you're still a murderer, you're still a villain, you still deserve to be punished for your crimes.
Yeah, I can see that. I think what Gwyn's going for, I guess, is that he's trying to say, because, I mean, just killing, I mean, everyone kills in this book, right? Corbin's killed, Gar killed, I mean, and anyone on the right side kills too.
Yeah.
And I think what Gwyn's going for, maybe unsuccessfully, is to say that Camlin's idea of killing was he's just stealing and looting, and if they got in his way, he was going to kill, unless they're a boy or a girl, a child or a woman. Now he's going to follow someone. It looks like he's finding friends, and he's going to try. If he's going to kill, it's in the name to protect people or people that he knows are good people. And I don't know if he's pulling it off, but it seemed to me that because he makes a line where he's looking at Corbin and his friends laughing and have, at the table, and he's like, these guys stuck up for me, and it's rare to have friends. I don't know if I ever had. So I think his outlook on killing maybe has changed, if that makes sense.
Well, yes and no. Look, let me give for example. Like, he felt the same way about Braith. He felt the same way about Braith, right? And he followed him, and it was okay until it wasn't. That's bottom line the way it was, right? So
you're thinking relapse?
Well, look, the storyline may have worked better for me if, for example, it had been more well developed that Braith wanted to create his own kingdom or to do something beyond just simple looting, thieving, and murder, right? If it was for a cause, then I can at least kind of go, well, then I understand why Camlin's doing what he's doing, aside from just simple, like, I want your money, therefore I will kill you.
Well, I guess for me, he is evil, but I feel like he's not as evil as in my mind as it is to yours, because they made a point in this novel, especially in the beginning, that child and women are off limits, but pretty much anybody else is fair game, and like you can challenge people for like whatever reason to the death and stuff like that, and just kill each other for all this stuff. So it felt like a more brutal world anyways. So this guy was just, I'm not trying to stick up for him, but I do think we need more time with this character to really understand what he's going for, because he really hasn't had that much time.
And I don't disagree with that, and I'm willing to be persuaded, but I do find unconvincing that I won't kill a 14-year-old boy, but 15-year-old boy, very game. I mean, I'm like...
Well, to me, that comes back to the same thing you had an issue with the ants and coming up with the shield walls. Like, okay, you guys never thought once about teamwork at all, just because two people standing close to each other. You didn't even have to be a wall, just like two people having each other's back. You guys do that in sword fights and protect each other. Wouldn't you think that would affect your tactics in any way? Because their society is so rigid in its in a thought process of how it handles women and children, how it handles fighting, ages, and taking your long night means you're a man and all this other stuff. So I just thought that was a little weird.
And let me be clear. I thought the whole Camlin storyline was actually very well written and enjoyable. Like, it's not like I didn't enjoy it. Like,
Okay.
I did enjoy it, but it's just that in my personal view, I'm like, I'll read it and it's enjoyable and it's fun, but don't expect me to root for the guy.
Right.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Two quick things. Yeah, I think to your point, I think his arc was a little fast tracked in this book. I think, because we meet him a little later and he's so quickly to becoming like someone he's setting us up to root for, maybe makes it a little less unbelievable. I also think, secondly, there's Gwynne tried to set up, and I'm not going to argue successfully, but he brings up that his family was killed by brigands, but essentially that he was, I'm pretty sure, brought like as orphan. He was orphaned and then brought in to that brigand group. So I do think there is some sort of I don't know what the effect is called, but some sort of traumatic effect where
So it's like the Stockholm syndrome, similar
Yes.
to where like you're adopted by what you were
right
being
in a
like held
sense.
prisoner with. Yeah.
And he was brought into this lifestyle very young, so this is all he's known. So this killing and things again,
The
not
Peter Quill effect, if you will. Yeah.
not excusing it, but when you're that's what happened to you so young, and I think there's some traumatic things in his brain that led to that choice. And I think just now he's in some sort of adulthood, finally having this conscious. I mean, it took long, and I'm not saying we should root for him, but I think that's what the author's going for, where he's now openly trying to make a decision like, no, if I'm going to take lives, like Gar says, taking a life is nothing to, joke about, or it's a serious thing, that it should be fighting for someone, a good person.
And this is, and let me be clear, this is a quibble. It's not like I feel.
I think
super
it's fair.
strongly.
I think you have a fair argument. I really do.
I would have felt differently. I legitimately would have felt differently if Camlin genuinely but mistakenly believed that Braith was trying to set up a kingdom of the outcast, and that had been developed a little bit more. And so Camlin thought he was fighting for a cause and not for basically for the baser stuff. That would have influenced me.
You're right. I think this was the hardest line for Gwynne as a character to straddle, just because, like what you said, in any story, to say that you can only you draw the line at killing people but not children and women. I think that's always a tough line to straddle. I kind of agree with you in that sense, where it's like a life is a life. I'm not totally sure, but also I kind of agree with Soul, where he says in this world people will just duel to the death for brave petty insult. You know what I mean? Like, I think they value men's lives much less than women and children, just because it's this culture. But I get it. To root for a character in a story sense, yeah, I think it's valid. But I'm also a sucker for redemption stories. I think I sway away from Era in that sense.
I'll be an island alone on this. Apparently, I'm disagreeing with the author too, so I can't exactly be super right. So,
well, I feel like we just haven't gotten enough. We're one book in. This feels like a quote about the whole series. We're obviously going to get more of him in 2. I'm curious what our thoughts will be at the end of book 2 when we discuss that one.
That was an interview he only had Malice out at that point. Take it easy.
Oh, but still, I think
I know
after one more book, I feel like our opinions may change to either for or against Camlin by then.
True. So the only other POV character we have, unless I'm wrong, is Mr. Evnus.
Evnus, yeah.
Yeah.
Boo.
So Evnus is he's kind of the counselor to King Brennan, who is like Corbin's king in that kingdom, who we spend most of the time at. And he's the first chapter we get, where it's kind of like a prologue, maybe, or first chapter, where he goes and meets Queen Rin, who's kind of a mustache twirling villain in her own right. And he makes
beautiful one.
Yep. She's beautiful and older, so she's like middle aged beautiful, which is good too. And and so he makes a deal essentially with Azeroth in the first chapter, saying, "I'm joining your side." Makes a deal with the devil essentially, and he's kind of a bitter man. His wife is sick, and the king doesn't really grant him, I guess, paid leave to go do stuff for his wife essentially, and he just resentment builds and builds even after making the deal with the devil, and eventually he's the one that kind of is betraying Brennan, letting kind of sets things in motion where all what breaks loose at the end of the book because of him. So for me, I kind of straddle the line, finding him to be a believable or really interesting villain. Because I think he dipped sometimes into mustache twirling territory too much. But at the same time, I understood that he was in pain because of his wife, and there's a lot of things that kind of clouded him. But I don't know how you guys thought about him. But we didn't have many chapters with him. But I don't know. I wasn't totally sold on his. He's essentially a catalyst for kind of a lot of the bad things that happen in this book.
That's what his chapters were for. Is for every time when you needed to see a little bit and a hint of what the quote bad guys are doing right now. That's going to set up the events or explain what's happening that you got thrown into with the other POVs. And I don't really like him. I mean, you're not supposed to like him. He's like you said. I feel like we needed a little more time or a little more. Morally gray to his black that he is and the evil.
It's more just like how he was written. Obviously, I don't like him. He kind of sucks. But like, so the first chapter is him making a deal with the devil, and it's just not super clear why. Is it just greed?
Yeah, it's his motivations.
I guess it's greed
and then
for
also
power.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. It's greed for power. His older brother, he kind of wants to one up his older brother, and I think the king at the end says, "You're hiding." Your wife is covering what's really at the bottom of this is greed for power. And I think that's probably the motive for everyone. But it still just seems like a vast jump. You're making a deal with a big evil person just because you want to not be in your brother's shadow, or you want to be a kingdom. And it didn't, I don't know. It was interesting to start with him, I think. And I don't know if that was I'd like to ask the author why he chose to do that, but maybe just to set the whole story up.
I like them starting with Evness. I would have been glad if we almost didn't get any more Evness for the rest of the book, because I just like to have the prologue, and then that little excerpt was a fun way to have the history, because they were short. They intrigued me just enough about the world to say, oh, bad guy's got a plan, cool, and then just jump into, the actual POVs you're going to have for the rest of the series. So I did enjoy his initial scene.
What about you, Era?
I agree with everything you guys said, except maybe it's just because because of my career or something. I know a dozen Evnesses.
Yeah.
Just people who put on a good face. You sit there and going, "Oh, they're so nice," or whatever. And then you sit down, you actually look at their actions, and you see they're motivated by one thing and one thing only, and that's pure self-interest. And this is life, and you just got to be able to spot these people and know how to deal with them. So, I mean,
I think part of my problem is no one spotted that. Why couldn't you be in this world, Era? Everyone just trusted this guy. Why didn't Brennan be like,
20 years?
This guy clearly resents me. I'm not letting him see his wife, and he would like pout and say yes. I don't know. It just seemed. I guess it's obvious to us because we're in his head. But
because people in this world outside of Nether, like Nether's group is exception, right? But even Veritas is part of this world where what matters? Your word, your bond, loyalty, and what Evness lacks is loyalty. Or let me rephrase that. His loyalty is circumscribed much differently than everybody else. His loyalty is to himself first.
Yeah.
Everybody else is second.
Yeah, it's like he kind of gamed the system. Like, what's that? It was like a bad movie with Ricky Gervais where he found out everyone couldn't tell a lie in that world, but he's like, he found out about lying, so he's like got an advantage over everyone. It's kind of Evness where he's like,
it was a weird movie.
Evanus has no shame, and he's just like, well, this is easy. Everyone just is so gullible and proud about honor. He's like, who cares about honor? You know,
Yeah, I
my
can just
wife's
do what I
dying,
want.
I
I'm
hate
so
my brother.
free. I can do it all.
Yeah, he like gives into his jealousy. So that is an interesting thing where you have this character who's just totally is not
Modern.
bothered by that, right?
He's
Modern,
modern.
right?
Mhm.
He's someone from our world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have too much to say about Evnus. I mean, most of it he was kind of just a thorn in the side of all good guys, but definitely Corbin to an extent. I mean, he tried to get Storm killed multiple times. You know, he was just kind of always lurking as this guy who's like evil, and we all know he is. But I think he was important to the book because he was an outlet to see into like Queen Rin's world, and all these other avenues of what was going on.
Well, I think Evnus is also important for that reason, but he's the connector between that world you just described and the Thayer.
Right.
So, in that sense, he's pretty important.
It's interesting. Like at the end, he says that Rin thinks I'm following her orders, but Azeroth is telling me this is clearly the person to follow.
Yep.
Which I have a little quibble with. I guess I should have brought it up earlier. So there were some scenes where like Corbin's seeing Nether, and he can see like hooks in Nether and like voices being whispered into him. I didn't like that at all. I think that same stuff, voices in Veritas' ear. I didn't like that they had a supernatural, or like the devil was kind of forcing them to do these things. I'd rather it them be their choices.
Yeah, I don't want that, or at least I don't want the viewer. I don't want us readers to know that. I want us to draw those conclusions.
Let me pause on that because I agree with both of you. And let me kind of piggyback on that. I'm normally a fan of soft magic. I don't care for like these hard magic systems where everything's super defined. This is clearly a soft magic world, but it's so unnecessary to the plot. I would just assume there'd be no magic at all.
Yeah. I think he struggled with it. I think he did want it to be I don't think he wanted it to be super magical. I think he wanted it to be close to our world as possible. Like even look at like the the dragons. They're not really they're closer to like Komodo dragons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Big Komodo dragons. So I think he always wanted it to be close to our world, but he didn't totally be successful there.
So you led to something I'm hoping for. So I love the Drags. I love the Wolven. By God, there better be big ass bears, and like because you got the big giants. I want to see some big other animals, kind of like in there, like fighting and stuff. I want that,
What about like some mammoths? Don't we have like another land that we haven't really even touched on yet? There could be some other stuff.
Yeah,
I feel like you may get something that you're looking
big
for there.
Bears, big eagles. I'm trying
big
to like
pandas. Big pandas.
No, that's not in Celtic myth. I'm trying to think what in the Celtic lore. You got to have a big ass horse, a huge horse.
Yeah. There should be like a race that like just has a bunch of horses that are like taller than like for the giants kind of thing. I feel like that would be
exactly.
Okay.
Well, you got the big snakes already. You got the worms.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, we're getting a little off.
No, good. Sorry. No, I love it. You guys are right on the right path. One of you said something it's coming. So
pandas knew it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, big red pandas.
Huge koala bear's gonna show up. Hey guys, what's up?
Those Celtic koala bears. So those are the POVs. I think we should at the end just characters we didn't hit, but you want to talk about. We can just do a round robin because there's so many and there's kind of a lot of memorable ones. I have one, but if you guys can think of any you want to talk to, I'll go.
Go for it.
So I like how Michael was kind of introduced in this story. The descriptions we get from him when we first meet him, you're like, oh, this guy's like a bad guy. He's this like creepy dude who's sizing up next to the king. And again, we're only seeing it from Veritas' perspective. And, in the Thayers, at first, they're like, oh, we don't trust this guy. He's kind of being withholding. And as you get more and more into the story, you kind of realize what side he leans on and what side, obviously, Nether is on. But I thought his kind of mysterious nature was interesting and, got me excited for other, him going forward in the book. And especially when he shows up with Gar and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? I mean, now why is he talking to Gar? And then obviously your hackles get raised about Gar even more than they were. And
Yeah.
so I liked him. He doesn't have a POV, but he's definitely seems like he's the one who has this big book that tells of the prophecy, essentially. So
He sounds like he's
obviously
coming up in the next couple books.
Yeah,
right.
He's probably going to be the emissary to the Ben Elim the same way like that. I forget the other guy's name is the emissary to the Kedushim.
Oh,
Yeah.
and by the way, I said this in our group chat, but I'll say it here. I have a prediction. I think Michael is definitely at least half giant or a giant in full, but is like small because everybody keeps mentioning he's unnaturally tall. They keep mentioning
that.
how tall he is, and I feel like he's at least like some part giant. That's all.
I like that.
That's all. That's all I got for
I
now.
like that. Yeah. I won't steal Gar from you, Soul. Go ahead.
No, I like Gar a lot. He reminds me of some other series mentors. And the best part, here's the best part of why I like Gar. And this is what makes this novel feel almost like progression fantasy is at the end when they start fighting the sword fight with his other, long lost brother or whatever they are. I don't know.
I knew you'd like that scene.
That scene when they go and they're like, "Oh, hey, they're moving so fast, I can't even see them." And we know all the best sword fighters here. Because it's just it's like Dragon Ball Z. It's like an anime. It's like you get a level that just keeps going up and up and up. And you're like, they're at the God level. And that's what this was. And it was just really fun and just put a smile on my face to see this craziness happen. And then, it ends. But still good.
Well, those people are interesting too. The Jihar. So we didn't talk about them, but they're a whole people that train their whole lives to defend the bright star, and that's their only purpose is to the good person to defend them. And they're these holy warriors essentially, and they've chosen most of them, not all of them. It's a very important thing. Most of them have gone to Nether's side because they see as Caldas as got wings, and they assumed he was a Ben Elim. So. That was interesting, and I guess as we find out at the end that Gar is one of them, perhaps definitely recognize fights like them, and so that's an interesting twist to it.
Sounds like a long lost prince or something. That's what it sounded like.
Definitely does. Era, did you have any character that stood out to you that you wanted to talk about and we didn't?
Alcyon.
Oh yes, I'm glad you brought him up.
I like that it's the giants aren't just big ugly brutes that go around stomping people for no reason. He had a personality, he had character, he had personal motivations, and just put in the context that the giants are people too, right? They're not just faceless villains. So I like that.
There's two. Yes, they made a point to bring that up in the book. There's two main races in this book: humans and giants. For the most part in this book, we saw POVs from humans. And we'll see if that changes in later books. But yeah, I like the way they write giants. Definitely, they have their own manners and characteristics. And the one thing I like about Alcyon in particular is I appreciated throughout the book you kind of saw a budding friendship between him and Veritas. And at the end of this book, I was definitely eager to see where that went.
Yeah, and just let me put a little point on that. And we learn throughout the story, Alcyon's helping out of his own motivations.
Yeah, keep your eye on that.
That's what I thought was by the end of the book. I'm like, yeah, he's helping them, but he's not helping them for the reasons they think he's helping them for, right? So, anyways, that was
we'll see more about that.
Yeah, it was just something I was like, very interesting. So, anyways, Alcyon.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Yeah, I think that does it. So did you have all your predictions? Is there anything else?
I don't have any other predictions. I do want to just mention, I think I had one other scene I want to talk about, or two other scenes. Okay.
Please.
And this goes back to the way he wrote, Gwynne wrote these scenes of comedy. So we got Corbin. He mistook eye contact with another teenage girl, which was the princess, and was waving at him to come over and come see him. And he got up. There's been no dialogue here. He got up, and then his sister says, "Hey, mom and dad," or "ma'am and dad." the princess is asking for me. I'm gonna go hang out with her and have a little bit of dinner and then come back. And they're like, yeah, go ahead. And Corbin just sits down. And he's like, he doesn't say anything. He just gets like, it's just a perfect teenage moment to show this kid's age. And then there's another moment where, again, the three of them are all together, the princess, him, and his sister, and they get good food and he gets crappy food. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but it's
Mhm.
hilarious. And he just like, he's looking around. He doesn't say anything because he's too embarrassed, but he's like, really, I'm eating this garbage and everybody else is getting like this good food because that's what he's relegated to. It's just a
Yep.
little stuff that Gwyn did like that didn't really point things out that really enhanced Corbin scenes for me.
Yep.
That's all. I
I
just
agree
wanted to
with that.
mention those two
You're right.
scenes. They were really funny.
You're right.
Those were the few scenes that I actually laughed out loud.
You're right. I would just say, just generally, now that I know this is his first book, I'm expecting to see the quality of writing go up on books
Yeah.
2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
That's something I'm genuinely looking forward to. And given that this is based on Celtic / Nordic stuff, I'm expecting the next 2.5 books to be pretty much a slog through hell for the main characters until like the comeuppance at the end. Cross fingers. So
Just hope no more deaths, which I know is going to happen, but still.
Did you guys have any quotes? I had one. I think it's from Camlin, but I can't totally remember.
No, I didn't really get any quotes, but go ahead.
Yeah.
I just like I think he says, and for the first time in an age, he felt a glimmer of something stir deep inside. He felt of value. And I thought that kind of stuck to him.
That was a good one. Yeah.
But and then there's who said that? I couldn't remember. History is of value. If more of us took heed of the mistakes of the past, the future could be a different thing. Which, God, I could get that tattooed on me.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be
Yeah, Gar had some good lines too. I liked when he was teaching.
Every time Thanon opened his mouth.
Yeah. The power of words. That was my favorite quote.
That was great.
Gar's power was like, haha, that was the power of words. He's like, what'd you mean by that? He's like, your dad didn't actually mean to beat him up when he was trying to teach you the power of words. He was trying to teach you something else. It was great.
And anything when they were talking about, controlling your anger and how that clouds and you make mistakes. I think Hallie and Engar both said stuff like that. So
yeah.
So it's okay, completely dissimilar authors, but kind of still the same sentiment kind of underlies both. So I don't know if either one of you read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, but
I've seen the movie. It sounds brutal. I don't know if I'm going to for the book.
Very intense, very bleak. I was told to read it when I became a dad. So like as my son was like laying on my chest, like he was like 2 months old, I'm reading the book, tears coming down my face as I'm reading it, and I'm like, it's of course it's a bleak book, but it's just one long love letter to his son. I love you, I love you, I love you. That's what The Road was about. This Malice so far, look, there's a lot going on in it, but at the end of the day, this is John Gwynne telling his children, I love you. That's really like what at the end of the day what it's all about. And I love that. So
I think that's a great way to end right there. Can't end on a better note than that. All right. That does it for Malice. We did it. We got 3 more to go, and we're going to do it. So yeah, I want to, again, go to the Discord, Legendarium's Discord, hang out with us, read these books. I think Lady Sweden just bought the book, so read along with us. I want to thank Craig from the Legendarium for letting us do this and play in his sandbox a little bit. I want to thank Horizon Brave for starting this. And we'll see you next time. For myself, Eradandis, Soulution.
See ya.
Adios.
Bye, guys.